It was Sunday night. The old church in northern Pennsylvania, which people had called the House of the Silent God for years, was shrouded in darkness as usual. It stood on a deserted road just outside the city, with a dense forest behind it and a dilapidated cemetery in front. No one dared to come here after sunset, especially on Sunday nights. The church bells had not rung for 30 years. The church had last been closed the day Pastor Samuel Howard mysteriously disappeared. After Sunday service, he went up to ring the bells, but never came down. The police searched the entire church, from the bell tower to the underground cellar, but they found no sign of Samuel. No body, no blood, no signs of struggle. From that day on, the bells fell silent forever. Or so people thought. I, Matthew Clark, am a history lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania. My job is to research the history of old buildings and religious sites. When I saw a small report in the local newspaper that bells were heard ringing in the old church on Sunday night, I initially dismissed it as a rumor, but then the same news came the next Sunday, and then the next Sunday. Each time, the time was the same, 12:17 a.m. I talked to the locals. Most were reluctant to talk. Some said, "Those aren't bells. They're the sound of our sins." Some said, "The priest is coming back." And some simply made the sign of the cross and remained silent. Finally, I decided to go and see for myself. On Sunday night, I parked my car near the church and walked inside. The church door was rusty, but strangely not locked. It was as if someone had left it open on purpose. As I entered, I was greeted by the smell of rotting wood, the old scent of candles, and a strange smell of dampness. It was completely silent inside. I turned on my flashlight. A thick layer of dust settled on the benches. The glass windows on the walls were broken, letting in moonlight. The cross hanging behind the arch was half crooked, as if someone had tried to forcefully bend it. My watch showed 12:10 at night. I looked up at the bell tower. The stairs were narrow and made of wood, and as soon as I stepped on them, a faint creaking sound began to echo inside the church. My heart beat faster with each step. The place had been empty for years, but it seemed as if someone was watching me go up. 12:15. I had reached the middle of the stairs when suddenly I thought someone whispered. The voice was so faint that I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was full of pain. I stopped. "Hello?" I spoke slowly. I received only silence in response. I explained to myself that this was my illusion. Old places play with the human mind. I started climbing again. 12:17. As soon as I reached the door of the bell room, the whole church suddenly shook. Dong, dong. The bell was ringing, automatically. My hands began to tremble. I pushed the door gently. Inside hung the same old big bell, covered in rust and lime scale. The ropes were broken. There was no mechanism that could make the bell ring, but it was moving. And with each ring, it seemed to me as if the walls of the church were breathing. At that moment, I realized that I was not alone. In the shadow of the bell, against the wall, stood a human-like figure. Tall, thin, dark. His face was not visible, but I could clearly feel that he was watching me. The bell rang one last time. Rang. And then suddenly everything went silent. I looked at the clock. 12:18. The shadow had disappeared, but there was something lying on the floor. I lowered the flashlight. It was an old Bible, with dry blood stains on it, and on the first page was a name, Samuel Howard. My heart sank. When I picked up the Bible, there was an old piece of paper inside, on which was written with trembling hands, "If the bells ring again, then know that I am back." At that moment, footsteps sounded from the church hall below. I was not alone. The sound of footsteps was slowly approaching. Every crack on the wooden floor felt like the church's bones aching. I held the flashlight tightly, but the light was trembling, as if it too was afraid of the reality of this place. "Who is it?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. There was no answer, but the footsteps did not stop. I peeked out of the bell room. Down in the main hall, there was a faint light, as if someone had lit old candles. Those candles that hadn't been here for years. One by one, the light flickered between the benches, and their shadows moved on the walls like people standing in worship bowing their heads. My breath caught. I decided to go down. As I stepped on each step, I felt as if someone was standing behind me, very close, so close that I could feel their cold breath on my neck. But every time I looked back, there was only darkness. As I reached the bottom, I saw a scene that my mind was not prepared for. The church hall was full. People were sitting on the benches, or at least, human-like shadows. Their faces were not clear, but their bodies, their bowed heads, and the movements of their hands were perfectly clear. It was like a time of worship. A man stood near the altar in front, dressed in black, holding a Bible. It was Pastor Samuel Howard. But he was not as he had appeared in the pictures. His face was pale, his eyes were dark, and on his lips was a smile that spoke not of worship, but of doom. "You are on time, Matthew," he said. "My name." I took a step back. What is all this? You cannot be alive." He laughed lightly. His laughter had a ringing sound like bells. "I am not alive. And not dead either. I am the one who returns to fulfill the promise." Suddenly, the shadows sitting on the benches began to raise their heads together. Their eyes were empty, but their gazes were fixed on me. "Who are these people?" I asked in a trembling voice. Samuel opened the Bible. "These are the ones who prayed in this church for the last time. Those who hid their sins, suppressed the truth, and then left this place." A thought suddenly occurred to me. "You have them all imprisoned here?" "No," he replied. "They came here of their own accord. When the bells ring, the truth awakens. And no one can escape the truth." Suddenly, the church bells began to ring again. Dong, dong. This time the sound was heavier than before. Old paintings began to fall from the walls. Cracks appeared in the glass windows. The shadows sitting on the benches began to writhe, as if someone had recocked their wounds. Samuel took a step toward me. "There's a reason you were called here, Matthew. You dig up history, but you don't leave the truth. You are the one who can tell this story to the world." "And the price?" I asked. He paused. His smile disappeared. "Every truth has a price." The church door closed automatically. The darkness began to deepen. The sound of the bells grew louder until my ears began to ache. "You have to make a choice," Samuel said. "Either you will stay here like us and ring the bells every Sunday night, or you will return alive, but with the promise that the story of this church will never be suppressed." I looked around. Those shadows, those imprisoned souls, those silent screams that could be heard even without words. I had made up my mind. "I will write this story," I said. "Every detail, every truth." The bells suddenly stopped. Silence fell, so deep that my ears began to ring. The next moment I found myself outside the church. The door was closed. The sun was about to rise. My watch showed 6:03. I turned back and looked at the church. The same old, silent, empty church. But I still had the Bible in my hand with Samuel Howard's name written on it. I wrote that story, published it. People laughed, some believed it, some didn't. But then one thing changed forever. People who live near this old church in Pennsylvania say that every Sunday night at exactly 12:17, the bells ring, and whoever listens carefully to that sound hears some truth in their life that they have always wanted to bury. And I wake up every Sunday night, because I know that the next time the bells ring, maybe they won't just be calling the truth, maybe they're calling me back.